Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us at the Mentoring Summit India 2024. We are thrilled to kick the summit with all of you. Policies are powerful tools to take efforts and ideas to scale and enshrine them as rights and benefits available to all. Globally, mentoring programs have become more widely accessible through well designed government efforts. In today's session, elevating youth mentorship as a policy priority in India, current opportunities and the future scope. Let us understand how mentoring currently figures in India's policy landscapes across education, youth, skilling, and health policies. The session will also help us to reflect how these policies at both the center and state level can support mentoring efforts better and how such policies and efforts should be designed to ensure equity and efficacy. We have a stellar line of speakers to discuss this very important topic today. Firstly, it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome our distinguished guest, Dr. Rajiv Gowda. He represented Karnataka as a member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha with a PhD in public policy from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Gowda has held many positions, including professor and chair of the Center for Public Policy at IIM Bangalore and director on the Central Board of the Reserve Bank of India. And most importantly, as an active citizen, he has supported many nonprofits, including serving as one of the founding trustees of Mentor Together. We welcome you, sir. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Nivedita Menon, who is the director at Center for Budget and Policy Studies. She holds a PhD from Pennsylvania State University in Sociology and Demography with a minor in Women's Studies. She has over 2 decades of research experience in diverse areas of gender, governance, education, and information technologies. She has also worked in the areas of governance, education, and information technologies. Recently, she has started working more deeply in the areas of public spaces and gender responsive budgeting. Please join us, ma'am. Now, I would like to welcome Rishikesh BS, who is a professor and associate director of School of Education at Azim Premji University. He leads the Hub for Education, Law, and Policy at the university. Prior to his present role at the university, he has been an educational researcher for over 2 decades. He is on various government advisory committees on issues concerning education, particularly in Karnataka. Please join, sir. Now, let's all welcome our final speaker for the session, Aditi Jha, who is the board director and country head, legal and government affairs, and a member of the leadership team at LinkedIn India. LinkedIn has been a strong champion for mentoring youth, both globally and in India. Prior to LinkedIn, Aditi has worked at ITC Limited, Johnson & Johnson, and Nishit Desai and Associates. Aditi earned her LLB and NUJS and holds a postgraduate degree in law from Standard University. We welcome you, ma'am. So yeah, we can start.
Good morning. We have a stellar panel here with us, scholars, researchers, professors, and practitioners. And all have an opportunity to look at this larger canvas of how to elevate mentorship as a policy priority. So what do we mean by policy priority, right? I mean, I alluded to this a little bit in the opening remarks, the magic of government is that it has the ability to change things at scale, to change the way people do things, to put resources behind policies and programs, and to bring about shifts that can make a transformational difference in terms of how the country, how states evolve going forward. When we think about policy, it's one thing, of course, to just announce something, possibly with a nice slogan, with a nice acronym, and things of that sort. But the real challenge is, of course, a phrase that we often come across nowadays called state capacity. Do we have the capacity to deliver on the grand visions that we might have in mind? The other major role of government in all of these things is the very ethos of why we have government. Government's job is to make sure that no one is left behind. And when you think about mentorship, it is a kind of intervention that helps level the playing field, that ensures that more people who don't have what comes from going to privileged background, growing up in privileged backgrounds, being in the right schools, the right families and networks, this is an opportunity to provide access to everyone. And that really is a mandate, because ultimately, especially in the decade after of Dr. Manmohan Singh's term, the whole approach became one of rights-based governance. So if you were to think about what our children, what the right to education means, maybe it's not just being able to access formal education. Maybe it's also about accessing everything else that is part of that landscape, which will ensure that you will emerge educated, but also confident, capable, like critical thinking, creative citizens, if you were to create a 5C framework there. Okay, the basic point is that's really what the larger mission is. And so there, what can government do? Government, over the years, has seen a transformation in the landscape. People who attend schools or colleges, which are government, often are missing out on many of the other benefits that some of the institutions in the private sector or non-profit sector may have, those opportunities. So it really is a very, very big canvas in front of us. And now when you start thinking about, is mentoring figuring on the policy landscape? I already mentioned to you that Telangana has the task initiative. Karnataka has the Prerna mentoring initiative. So you're starting to see these. I know that there was one other state in the NCR region which also announced a program of this sort, but that didn't really go anywhere, right? So that's the thing. When these sorts of programs are announced and initiated, they come with a tremendous responsibility for those who are starting this to deliver, to essentially be there for children, youngsters, youth, and to give them the kind of support that that's promised in different ways. And organizations like Mentor Together have shown us the way. There are 3-4 other such organizations elsewhere as well. And together, we are trying to lay out a policy roadmap. And I think I should just start with Professor Rishikesh, because you study education policy, and when you think about education policy, the first thing that comes to mind is the NEP, the National Education Policy that was announced a couple of years ago. And there you will see a lot of mention of the term mentoring. What is the conception of mentoring in the NEP? Do you think they are on the right track? And what would you suggest as the ways forward in terms of scaling and elevating mentoring as a policy priority?
Thanks, Dr. Gowda. Good morning, all of you, and thanks to Mentor Together, Arundhati and team for having me over here. Well, before we go into NEP, I think what I would also like to share is that aspects of mentoring has been alluded to even in the earlier policies. Even if you look at something as early as Dr. Radhakrishna Committee's report in 48, right, which is focusing on higher education, or soon after that, you had Muralidhar Committee looking at secondary education. Now, when you read between the lines, some of the provisions will not, it's not possible to implement unless you have some kind of a mentoring model. It's just that they've not overtly stated that. One would have had to think through that, and I'm sure during implementation, I've not really focused closely on those. There would have been mentoring models that would have been adopted. Now, coming to Kotari Commission, at least very clearly, for instance, their focus on social service, community involvement, even the establishment of, for instance, the National Cadet Corps in all higher education institutions. Now, these are not things that you do through traditional teaching, right? It will have to be through role modeling, through mentoring. So in that sense, there has always been mentoring which has been alluded to, if not directly, at least for implementation, it would have been very, very necessary. But coming to NEP 2020, now it's been overtly mentioned. In fact, NEP on multiple occasions speaks about mentoring. I'm very quickly going to read out 3 or 4 of those aspects in NEP to give you idea as to what it could mean for the drafters of NEP in terms of how they're envisaging it. The first one: each institution will be committed to the holistic development of students and create strong internal systems for supporting diverse student cohorts in academic and social domains, both inside and outside formal academic interactions in the classroom. Faculty will have the capacity and training to be able to approach students, not just as teachers, but also as mentors and guides. Very clearly focusing on the students and what needs to happen with the students institutionally. Another point is senior students with academic inclinations may be given opportunities to mentor juniors and be recognized as teaching assistants in appropriate cases with due academic credits. In some sense, encouraging peer mentoring, though this is from the draft policy, which is Dr. Kasurirangan's report. You have another point in the main NEP which says teacher preparation is an activity that requires multidisciplinary perspectives and knowledge, formation of dispositions and values, and development of practice under the best mentors. Now you see it's moved into even the teacher education space wherein mentorship is being spoken about. Each new faculty member may also be assigned a faculty mentor having a long tenure in a higher education institution and an exemplary track record. So, even as we join into a higher education institutions, to have someone who would mentor us along as we progress through a career. So now, each of these are very clearly indicating that what NEP is suggesting is to create an ecosystem of mentorship or mentoring. They, of course, go on to talk about what kind of structures and a few things on those lines. But then the idea is, how do you ensure that the spirit of mentoring is there, embedded in everything that we do in the higher education space? In fact, there are some things in school education also, will not go there. So this is really what I would read as a suggestion or recommendation from the NEP.
Has any follow-up happened on that?
There is a National Research Foundation which is also supposed to earmark budget for research, which is to be mentored in different ways. So there is, in that sense, something's happened. But then this other point that they have of a national mission for mentoring, that has not come alive yet, which is very crucial. In fact, if we want to formalize and provide structures, the national mission for mentoring really has to come alive. It has to be funded. There will have to be, the ministry will have to kind of think about guidelines in terms of potential structures. So I think things are yet to happen on those lines. Yeah, I'll pause here. Thanks.
Thanks, Rishikesh. Nivedita, if I could turn to you. See, there's been a lot of work done when it comes to disadvantaged groups, gender-related initiatives of various kinds, etc. Have you seen mentoring figure in these kinds of initiatives?
Yes, absolutely. Because as Arundhati actually already mentioned, you mentioned that there have been sort of initiatives that have looked at mentoring girls and women, because that has been a very significant aspect of our educational landscape, whether it's formal or informal spaces. But there are specific ways in which, in our own project, when we did this mentoring program in Bihar with 10 government schools, where we tried to actually enter the spaces within the classrooms, where we tried to get a mentor from the community to be part of those classrooms, and not necessarily the teacher, but one classroom per week. And what we learned there was that the kinds of intersectionalities that come up, not just with respect to gender, but other kinds of differences in diversity, right? And this I will sort of point out in terms of power. So there is a specific way in which mentorship has to engage very directly with the power differential, one of having known something much more than the other person, but also, for example, of gender, of caste, of not actually being in a geographically different place, especially if the community member is coming from somewhere. And also then language, religion, all of those things start to really feature. And what we really realized is that the way in which that inequality that is built within that sort of structure is to really highlight what Dr. Kiran mentioned in the earlier thing, which is how do you then co-learn rather than having this mode of teaching, which is very traditionally built within that sort of policy. It's built within the policy, but it's also built within practice. Very much a practice. Whether it is built in the policy or not, it's definitely there in the practice of it. Is the idea of how do you then engage with critical thinking rather than sort of having prescriptive frameworks, right? So yes, I'm a role model. Yes, I'm doing something, but that need not be your path, right? Like, yes, it can be one of the many paths, but how do I allow you to set your own frame, set your own thinking? How does that happen? I think that's really the foundation for engaging with any kinds of sort of inequalities. And one of the things that I think, something that we're still sort of trying to wrap our minds around, is there is a specific space for one is training, one is orientation, but there's also a specific personality that comes into mentors, and that really you couldn't really predict. And that's really something that we've learned when we are engaging with very natural mentors who sort of emerge from that cohort, right? So one is you have a trained mentor who goes in, but then the second tier that we were talking about earlier is who becomes that is not necessarily very predictable. And that's really something that as a policy framework, I think it's something to very interesting sort of to grapple with. I think it can be done. I'm not saying that personality cannot be accounted for, but there's a specific process in terms of policy that we can sort of engage with. And then, of course, I think I also want to just take 1 minute to highlight the dangers that we also saw with respect to engaging with inequality is oftentimes, and this we had to guard against, and that's one of the things that I'm actually wanting to highlight, is that when role modeling happens, you also have a tendency towards homogeneity, that there is one way, there is a right way, and if you agree with me, then you're in an in crowd, right? And then there is a specific forms of exclusion that happens, and that I think is something that we do actually have to work with. I think it's useful to understand that that's part of the systemic issues that come naturally when, like 10 government schools, very diverse, one in Patna, one in Muzaffarpur, and then you have very different children who are engaging very differently, especially if you have, caste that is built within the classroom where you have, boys sitting on the benches, girls sitting on the floor. Then who gets to speak? Who gets to be heard? And what the mentor pays attention to then becomes very critical. And how do you then how does an individual then, I think, and that's really the policy question, how does an individual engage with the structural inequalities that then becomes very visible in the classroom or elsewhere?
Thanks. The complexities are really, really challenging. Anyway, let me turn to a very different dimension. Aditi, you're from LinkedIn and the private sector, and LinkedIn is a platform which brings a large number of typically educated professionals together. And you have youngsters coming on board, but also partly trying to find mentors or guides or connect with people all the time. And what have you found? In your own research on the platform, have you found sort of a yearning for mentoring? Have there been initiatives that actually take the concept of mentoring forward in that? It's still a limited space, but still, it's a very, very it's a space filled with motivated people who want to be there with some aspirations that they want to fulfill.
Thank you, Dr. Gada. Show of hands, who's not on LinkedIn in this room?
Can you hear her?
Am I audible? Perfect. Okay. And the reason I asked this question is not to do some more marketing for the company, but basically to sort of drive home the point that, yeah, it is the world's largest professional platform. And that gives us a unique ability. With the 1 billion members that we have, 140,000 colleges, 40,000 skills, 14 million jobs, about 67 million different companies who use this platform. So the way these data points intersect with each other, it gives us a real-time nuanced view of what's really happening in the labor market force. And we call it the LinkedIn economic graph. And we leverage LinkedIn economic graph to cull out insights, to cull out data that can then support policy making for workforce and skill development. Now, coming specifically to the question of youth and mentoring, there are about three things that I'd like to cover. The first is that our jobs are changing. I mean, if you think of the same job 5 years back, 10 years back, the skills required to do that job is very different from the skills that we require to do the same job today. And the LinkedIn Economic Graph research, it did some modeling, and it's come up with this staggering data point that by 2030, the skills needed to do the same job will change by about 65%. And then you have AI, Gen AI coming in, which will further complicate or accelerate this race. What the data about AI is telling us is that when technology will become more universally available, when AI can do a lot of the coding and other technical stuff, then soft skills will become important. How do you lead? How do you communicate? Can you do critical thinking, as you mentioned? Can you do problem solving? Soft skills that traditionally, as part of our education system, as part of our pedagogy, we've not really paid a lot of emphasis to. We've always been focused more on the hard skill side. So there is this changing and fast-changing skills landscape that the youth are entering right now. They're coming from a pedagogy that may or may not have trained them for the new jobs, the jobs of the 21st century that Ian referred to in the previous session. The second thing that we've noticed is this concept of network gap. And Doctor, you mentioned a little bit about it, that not all of us have the same privilege entering the workforce, right? We're all a function of who our parents were, which housing society you grew up in, where you went to college, where your first job was, who your first bosses were. So a lot of our professional trajectory gets informed by a lot of these factors that may not be equitable and that we have no control on. And we call this a network gap. We believe that two people who have the same skill, who have the same talent, should have access to the same opportunity. Unfortunately, because of network gap, that's not true. So in LinkedIn, we're trying, we have a lot of endeavors, and on part of the work we do through our CSR and social impact team with Mentor Together is, how do we close this network gap? Just because you did not go to a similar school, or just because your dad was not in the government services, you should not be left out of opportunity. And the third thing is, before I go to the third thing, there's another interesting piece of research that we did was on the power of weak ties. Whenever we talk of ties, we think of very close ties. Your best friend, daddy's best friend, your family member. But what our research on LinkedIn has shown is that your weak ties can help you land the next economic opportunity twice as faster as a close tie, which means someone you meet at a conference or someone who don't have a very close relationship with is actually more helpful in landing you your next economic opportunity. I think that's very powerful in thinking about how mentoring can work. And the third gap that I want to talk about, of course, is knowledge gap. I think all of us have spoken about that the transition from school to work is hard, it's complex. There is a lack of career guidance. All of us are told to become either doctors or engineers and nothing else. My going to law school in the year 2000 was an act of teenage rebellion. Everyone expected me to follow the given path. So I think, how do we provide more of this knowledge to the kids who are in schools? How do we make mentoring and career counseling come early and not at the end of higher education, not at the end of high school? And that's some of the work we're doing, Arundhati, with you as well. you mentioned, Arundhati, that why don't the top 100 companies come together and fund more of the mentoring programs? So we do, at LinkedIn, we are doing a lot of this funding through our CSR grants as well, but we also run a program called LinkedIn Coaches, which is voluntary for our employees. So all our employees, they reach out to people who don't have similar opportunity, and we run these programs where we train kids on how to make your LinkedIn profiles, how do you look for a job, how do you write a good resume, how do you ace interviews, how do you reach out to mentors on LinkedIn. We launched this program in 2015, and we've coached about 1 million plus kids all over the world. We run it very successfully in India as well, along with Mentor Together. And then we've also done some specific carve-outs. For instance, in India, tech jobs, IT jobs are sort of the what everyone wants to get into. So we have a specific Innovate for You subset of the LinkedIn Coaches program, where we have our engineers. We have 1,500 engineers in LinkedIn in Bangalore. We have engineers reach out to tier 2, tier 3 colleges, STEM, students who are doing STEM degrees to do mentoring exercises, and some of these kids have gone on to land internships and jobs. And I think one story that really touches that really touches us is the story of Kusum Salvi. She's a first generation student in Bombay, and she was part of the LinkedIn Coaches program. She was also part of a UN program that we fund on digital skills. And she had a lot of pressure, gender norms, get married, start contributing to the family fast, stop studying and start contributing. But she overcame all of that, and she's landed a job in Sodexo. And it is not stopped there because of mentoring and seeing what is out there, what else is out there. Now she's like, I want to do a master's degree in Australia. Yeah, I can go on, but I'll stop.
Let me push you a little further. With these kinds of initiatives, have you, and the platform and its extraordinary potential, can you think of other kinds of initiatives, including mentoring kinds of initiatives that LinkedIn could pioneer?
That's my like KRA of the year. So I think there are two parts to it. One is LinkedIn as a company and the work we do through our social impact, through our employees, etc. And then there's the power of the platform. As the world's largest platform, professional platform, everyone who's seeking mentoring is likely there, and anyone who can provide that mentoring is also there. Whether it is whether you want mentoring on career advice, whether you're a young person who wants to talk to a woman leader, whether you want technical skill advice, like I want to be a full stack developer. I think all those experts are there, and I think it is, if we haven't done it yet, shame on us. But yeah, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to ensure that this matchmaking happens. We can use all the AI power that we have to ensure some of this matchmaking happens on LinkedIn. Project for us.
Yeah, no, I think that's so filled with potential and so many diverse backgrounds. And one of the challenges in terms of youngsters is that they don't know what paths to pursue and how to go about. Just some practical advice sometimes. And people who have already succeeded in these domains could probably make a huge difference going forward. Rishikesh, let me turn to you. We mentioned this Prerana program, right? This is what the government of Karnataka has launched and focused on government colleges. And as you think about these kinds of initiatives, can you think through how they can be fleshed out better, how they can really make an impact, and what other ideas and thoughts you might have on those kinds of government initiatives?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant beginning. I mean, those of you who've not been onto the Prerana platform, the website, please do, because in terms of having a well-established, well-thought-through platform, I think things are in place. Now, the question really is as to how do you take it forward to ensure that it is effective and it meets the objective. That is where I think there are other things that needs to come in, and particularly the ownership of the colleges. So we have 450 odd colleges, the government colleges, and I think the faculty, of course, the principal and the faculty will have to engage with the platform as and when requests are coming in, engaging with the potential mentors and ensuring that there is some kind of a plan. As in the morning we were hearing Dr. Modi that things have to be long term, and there are multiple things on which, as you were just sharing, that one would probably require mentoring. Now, a general session, let's say I sign up on the platform, I'm invited to college, let's say all of us sign up and we are invited every other week. That could probably spark some kind of a thought in a person to think about a career, but then that's not enough. So when will a real meaningful mentoring happen is when there is a continuous engagement with different groups of students wanting different kinds of things. And for that, you would need, for instance, a cell, let's say, within a college. And that cell can't be done through a government order. It will have to be something that faculty gets excited about and they establish it. You will have to put in effort beyond work hours. So these are things that we will have to now motivate colleagues in the colleges to establish, so that the brilliant beginning can then be taken forward to really meet the objectives.
Sure. I would think there's a tremendous role for alumni as well, because, in India, if you look at alumni, we rarely tap into alumni. And it's extraordinarily important for, they serve as role models. They are people who've come from the same college, same backgrounds possibly, and have succeeded in one way or the other, giving us the confidence that we too can do it, right? And so that, I think, beyond just the teachers who are already quite overloaded, I think ways to sort of engage with alumni could make a huge difference as well.
Sure. But Dr. Gowda, as you were mentioning in your earlier remark, it's easy when you look at the platform. We think that given the kind of state that we are in, it would be very easy to get a lot of people to sign up and probably come and also do some sessions. But then how do we ensure that the groups become smaller? There is a more one-to-one engagement. Yeah. For that, there is a lot more that we will have to necessarily ask from the colleges. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone benefits. At the end of the day, the aim of any higher education institution is to see the students, go on to do great things.
Sure. And the mentoring framework here that we're mostly talking about is a one-on-one approach rather than something much broader than that. But I think it's still worth exploring initial steps which are broader, but then ultimately move forward. Your teenage rebellion going to law college reminds me, when I was also a rebel because I chose to study a BA in Bangalore at a time when you only studied engineering or medicine. I remember one man warning me in Kannada, "Yaru ninge hen kodadilla." He said, "No one will give you their daughter to get married to." So that didn't happen, but still, that was a very, very serious warning for anyone. Anyway, those sorts of things have happened in the past. But basically, I was thinking of, this triggered a memory. When we did this International Women's Day event at NMKRV College, after the event, we were sitting at the canteen, and there were two young women talking in the seats behind us. And one was telling the other, "Look, I always wanted to do law, and now that I've seen this woman lawyer and how she is going about her career, I'm going to do it even though my parents don't want me to go down that path." So I want to actually bring up this issue, which is there are lots of these challenges where aspirations versus backgrounds, constraints, what is possible, what should, the other intersectionalities that you talked about and how people are boxed into certain role expectations. These are really minefields. How do you navigate them? How do you negotiate them in the context of mentoring initiatives?
I think one of the things that we've learned, and I want to just sort of speak a little bit about two other studies that we've done, which was not really related to mentoring, but actually has lessons for what you just asked about. What do we do when we have these minefields of having one, inequality sort of seeped into these institutions that we sort of have to deal with? One is actually going back to the example of, the alumni example as well. So we were doing the secondary education project in Chittoor, where we were studying the boys and girls exclusion, actually out of school experiences in secondary education. And what we found is that in specific schools in Chittoor, the alumni network from the US actually was able to fund not just schooling, but also, I think, teachers' time, extra time. So that actually helped a lot in terms of, for example, one of the boys, the fan had gone out, and he just came in, and while we were just talking to the principal, he came in and fixed it. And so we were just talking to him, and he said, no, it's this is all part of the science fair, we organize it every year. And so I said, is it part of the curriculum? And he said, no, this is something that our teachers teach us after 4 o'clock. And this after 4 o'clock was like a thing, that after 4 o'clock the English classes are done, after 4 o'clock this. And so there was also a very sort of a vibrant schooling community that was not just sort of in the school, but there's also community. There was also a specific way in which the principal and the maths teacher together were trying to get these networks that you spoke about. Because these alumni had come from the US or had gone to the US, there was a specific way in which that pathway in their heads. Now, whether all of them would go to the US was sort of not really material, but the fact is that there was a specific vision making that the schools were indulging in, right? That the schools were saying, we want these children to do this, and because the teachers didn't have time, we will do it. Like, because one of the things that I want to actually also illustrate in all of the studies that we've done is teachers are already overburdened. I mean, exceedingly overburdened, and having, policies involving them in constantly doing more and more actually does not necessarily help, because already the teaching burden is so high. So what they were able to do is take some teachers away from those sort of normal rigorous census and extracurricular duties that they have to doing actual sort of teaching, and that actually really helps. So there is a specific way in which decentralization helps. So one of the things that the principal was saying is, I want certain kinds of independence to kind of do the things that I want to do. And that's one of the very central lessons that we learned, is that having, you can, like, there was this one teacher, he said, in the teacher training programs, Tare Zameen Pe can be shown and can be taught to us. But when we come back to the schooling environments, we can't put into practice even if we want to put into practice. So I want to mentor my children, but I can't do that, given I have to also teach 80 kids all subjects, because we don't have Hindi, English kind of teachers. So one is, I think, specific ways in which decentralization can be built within a specific policy. But the other thing is, I think we function very well, I think, within rules, restrictions, and regulations within policy. And I think a step back from that would be very useful. So focusing on, let's say, process, principles, and pedagogy. I think those three things. And when I mean process, I mean something that I think was referred to in the earlier session, which is relationships. Relationships are inherently about process. There is not a linear path that you go from one place to another place. There is everything happens in spurts sometimes. Like suddenly the light bulb goes off, and then the kind of learning that you have cannot be tracked intervention. And so having a policy that engages with process, having specific kinds of non-negotiable principles saying this shall not happen. For example, there is no space for violence or any kind of controlling mechanism that can even emerge within this kind of mentoring relationship, very significant. And also, I think, like, non-negotiable principles saying co-production of knowledge, or tapping into children's old knowledge systems, because which is very, very central to having that kind of conversation saying, I also have something to contribute to this relationship, instead of just getting, this idea that the mentor will teach me everything I need to kind of know. And I think this non-negotiable principles actually came from Mahila Samakhya, where this is a public, this is a policy that has, huge amounts of scale, and really built on the idea of one thing, on having non-negotiable principles that can then be interpreted in different ways in different parts of the country, no matter where you are. So it is possible, and I think this is my idea, is it is possible to build a policy that can move away from this must happen, this should happen, to, okay, this is something that we will do, we will not do. And then, of course, how we will do it. I think that's really central, is what are we focused in terms of our learning, teaching sort of pedagogy?
Thanks. So when you use the word relationship, that's really the aspiration, but that's also the complexity of the whole thing, because relationships mean a set of expectations that develop, and and in today's world, people may expect that the mentor will get you a job, he will create some other opening for you, or in the case of us politicians, we're always expected to break the rules for somebody, and it's a real challenge to draw those boundaries and say, no, this much and no further, right? So that's the sort of situation. And I think when we talk about scaling these programs, working with, through government and policies, I think a little bit of work on these guardrails, on the boundaries and things of that sort would make a huge difference, such that no expectations are mismatched, no one feels exploited, no one feels let down, that the whole thing can make a difference. Anyway, we've had our say. Let's open it up to the audience. Thank you. We have a range of insights that we've already had a chance to engage with, but I'm sure there are questions that you all have. And can we have hands, please? And people with mics, can you go first to this gentleman right in front of me, and then the lady next to the aisle there, and then the lady in the corner here. Okay. Anyone else? I have 3, 1 more, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'm not sure where the mic is, but they're all here. Okay. And if you can keep your questions very compact, that would help. If you can identify who the question is directed to, that would also be helpful.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Karthi Vidya. I run a nonprofit called Team Everest, where we do a lot of mentoring. In fact, I've done more than 7 lakh phone calls via 1:1 mentoring. We're doing it from 2016 onwards. So one of the things I want to check is, this is a very interesting thing where I strongly believe mentoring should become a policy actually. But on the other hand, see, we are dealing with Gen Zs basically. So when you talk about policy, it's mostly like a push mechanism, right? And Gen Z where, like if they're not interested, they don't care about it. How do you make it as a pull rather than a push? That's one question. Second thing is, Aditi, you spoke very well about LinkedIn. A lot of things I learned from whatever you spoke. See, we work with a lot of financially poor children, especially parentless, single parented, even in cities like Chennai, where like metros like Chennai, this has not reached like how Instagram has reached. Now I see LinkedIn as a small video snippet like reel, where but it's mostly targeted towards professional. These are very interesting things. See, we have worked with LinkedIn CSR teams in the past where we have got licenses to teach our children. I call it as a like fixing the LinkedIn inequality gap. Still, this is being treated as a tool for the privileged people. Still, it's not yet reached the financially poor where it can make a huger impact. How do we do that? So those are my questions.
Go ahead, Ed.
So I'll answer the second part of your question, which is specific to us. So, see, LinkedIn's vision is to provide economic opportunity to every member of the global workforce. But you're right that in India we slightly over-indexed on people who work, people who are English-speaking, stay in tier 1, tier 2 cities. We're over-indexed in certain industries. So actually, if you look at the IT industry, it's gone beyond this privileged bracket that we're talking about. So even a data entry operator in a tier 2, tier 3 town is on LinkedIn. So it's a work in progress. It is a priority for us. It makes business sense for us as well, and it also aligns with our vision and mission that every member who can get economic opportunity because of LinkedIn, we will try and make LinkedIn available to them. We also launched LinkedIn in a host of Indian languages. It's not an English only platform anymore. We are heavily indexing on video right now because, as you said, Gen Z is not going to. They come and see a text feed and they're like, what on earth is this? So we are indexing heavily on video as well. And I think that's also an opportunity for mentoring. That's also learning for us that short videos, that's how also the Gen Z is consuming and learning as well, through short form and long form video. So that may be an opportunity area for all of us as we think of this area.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you. I found all four panelists very interesting. My question specifically is
And your name as well, please.
my name is Lavanya. I'm from an organization called Kriya. We have been experimenting with feminist mentoring for women in the rural communities. So my question for you is for you, Nivedita, and my question is that in our experience of about 8 years now, we found that most of our hard work is in building the cadre of mentors. And that's where we've had to deconstruct power, their own use and abuse of power, going over principles of feminist, concepts of feminism, intersections, etc. So I wanted to check with you on what your experience was and how you built your pool of mentors. The work they do with mentees is then subsequent to that, but thank you.
So our experience with mentors have actually been very limited. So nothing like what Kriya would engage with. But we did study the mentorship process. So we actually only worked with 4. And that itself, I can tell you, was very hard. Primarily because I think if you're especially engaged with, and we engaged with critical thinking in a feminist frame. And that can be quite hard, especially if you, I mean, I'll give you a small example with respect to not just mentors, but the entire ecosystem. So my engagement with, I mean, so one of the things that we really understood is that it was not necessarily only with the mentors that we needed to work with, but the entire ecosystem, because the child is coming from a specific ecosystem, and only that 1 hour a week, we realized over a period of time, I think within 2 very short months, that orientation of the mentor is one thing, but there's also an orientation in terms of the classroom environment, and then the ecosystem, and then family, and all of that. Now, that's a pretty long, intense process, and we sort of decided that we would be very conscious about it. So, in one of the baseline interviews, we actually gave them a picture of the sanitary pad, for example. And then the teachers, it's not that we even distributed it, we just sent it to the principal to sort of say, is this survey okay? And teachers had a huge problem even administering that to the boys, not to the girls, but to the boys. So, and the other thing is there is a specific way in which mentors, whether they are, I mean, and I think the answer that you're sort of seeking, I'm not sure I have an answer to, but what we really encountered, which was very difficult to sort of dislodge, is a very deeply ingrained idea about who that person is in the front of the classroom. So, for example, it took us about 6 months to let the school know that if it's a loud classroom, it's an engaged classroom. That it's not silence, it's not discipline, it is not. So, if you have a very loud, and the thing is, that was the most frequent complaint that we got. And so, it's not just in preparing, I think, the mentors, which I'm assuming is a very difficult task, but it's also in preparing the environment around that the mentors also have to struggle with, because each of our mentors were also saying, हमको complaints मिलते रहते हैं कि there is no, हम लोग, it's so loud, so principals don't want to give us these classrooms anymore. So just saying that is a challenge in the entire system, and not just, I think, it's not person-centric. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but getting mentors is the real challenge across the board. Yes, please go ahead. You want to say something, Arundhati? Oh, you'll have to wait your turn.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Hi. My name is Sumitra. I'm an art historian. My question is to you, Nivedita, basically. Cutting back to the policy priority of the panel, how much room is available to provide support for mentors and students who fall in the cracks of binary gender? Because you've done a lot of work with government schools, and in those specific regions, is there any room? Is binary gender a very big deal? I'm asking because I've done a lot of work with young artists, so that's about it.
In our mentoring sort of modules, one of the primary thing was to break. The first thing that because we're looking at gender as part of the major lens in terms of critical thinking, we did do these activities where what are the roles of girls, what are the role of boys, and also looking at, like, for example, complete the picture, like basically picture making in terms of actually taking from Kamala Bhasin's uh, um, it's actually what is colorful girls and rainbow boys. It's a beautiful sort of framing. And what we did is we decided to have different models for boys and girls to actually think about what kind of color am I, what kind of colors would suit me. And we did find, and it's clear in the baseline and the end line, that if you're introducing these concepts pretty early, which is in 6th grade, 7th grade, there is a space to explore that. So we were able to find in 10th, in the 10 schools that we were looking at, that if, for example, you gave them picture to complete as to who would be shaving the hair, they would fill it with long hair if they had some level of orientation, that the idea that women could be barbers, that the idea that the person running the race, the girl, could win. But that orientation had to be fairly subtle and had to sort of not be very, but it is a possibility. And I mentioned the people, girls sitting in the floor, the boys sitting. At the end of those classes, that discussion happened as to why is it that I'm sitting down and you're sitting up, and what is that distinguishes both of us. So it is possible to do through that mentorship, and also because it's a safer space in many ways. It's not a teacher. You can push those boundaries saying, but I don't agree, right? So when a person in authority says I don't agree, then it's easier for then different kinds of viewpoints to present itself in the classroom.
Yeah, that's the kind of really high tension kinds of context that we worried about. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you. I think the discussion was very enriching. My question's this.
Yeah, your name as well, please.
My name is Akshay. I am from Make a Difference. We support children in need of care and protection. And Make a Difference largely is a volunteer-based organization, and we look for one-on-one mentoring for children. And one of the roadblocks that we find is trying to figure out what's in it for the mentors, right? In this world, which is largely transactional and social, this question is basically for Dr. Rajiv and as well as Aditi, because I believe LinkedIn as a platform is beyond policies in some sense, or probably you can make your own policies. So what's the social capital for somebody to, social equity for somebody to be a mentor, and what's in it for them? Are there any government policies that's, tilting towards it, or anything that LinkedIn's doing about it?
Well, I can't think of government policies per se, but I think in the corporate sector, you would probably see that it would be possible under the HR agendas where you are focusing on, allowing people to grow in multiple dimensions, to add one of these kinds of possibilities as an avenue to make a difference. And basically, you could still sell it in a transactional way by saying, this is going to make a difference to you. Because actually, being a mentor is also a very enriching, growing experience, growth experience. So in that sense, it's about learning to listen, to empathize, to support, and really, it could make a huge difference in terms of investing in our human resources. So it's something that can be added as one more dimension. I don't see how it would happen in the government context, but at least this is what I was thinking of from the private sector point of view. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the LinkedIn Coaches program that we run is completely voluntary, and our employees sign up for it. They get no extra points for doing it, and we've never had to. Our programs have always been oversubscribed. It's not like we have to go begging people to join the program. And I think building on what you said, that look, in the corporate world at least, everyone is looking for progress, right? Everyone's looking like, I'm an individual contributor, now I want to become a manager. And these are wonderful ways to develop some of your people management skills. You mentioned empathy, listening, have, listening to different points of view. Yeah, so I think so there are two parts to it. One is you're building muscle that you probably can't in, like, if you're still a junior person, if you just enter the workforce or an individual contributor, and this is a great opportunity to build some of those skills. And I think most people do it because everyone wants to give back in some way or the other. I think you come to a conference like this, you start questioning your life choices. So I think everyone wants that. Everyone wants that opportunity okay, I'm making money to pay the bills, but I also have this wonderful privileged position that I'm in. How do I pay it forward?
Who are the others who had their hands up? Yeah, okay, I know. Okay, you've got the mic? Well, then we'll start with you. And next is our friend from Telangana. Yeah. Oh, and then.
Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Sharan Mishra. I work with some of India's most popular apps, Daily Hunt, which is a news app. And I also work with Josh, which is a short video platform. And I can completely correlate what Aditi said about how the younger generation is, has lesser time span, attention span, and is stuck to videos, short videos especially. My question primarily is maybe to Dr. Rajiv or Aditi. I have been in the industry for quite some time, seen the industry grow. I myself grew. And if I were to choose an opportunity as a mentor, as a professional opportunity, is there something there in India right now? Or do you see something like this in India, where I can leave my professional career and move into and also have a financially over there?
That, I think, is a tough question, but because, so far we've been thinking along the lines of essentially voluntary initiatives. There can be professional possibilities. When she used the word coach, right? At least in executive coaching, there is there's a whole lucrative career in terms of helping CEOs and other senior leaders. So those sorts of possibilities exist professionally. But I think we're not talking at those levels at all. We're talking about something much more mass, right? But the very fact that that comes to mind shows you how at every stage people need some mentoring. I can think of many times when a little bit of crucial mentoring would have changed the trajectory of my own personal and political career. Anyway, that's how it is. Arundhati, go ahead.
So my question is for Rishi and Dr. Gowda. When we've studied the US mentoring space, actually the nonprofits are very effectively able to advocate their legislators, senators to put mentoring on the agenda, right? Every year they will get like hundreds of $1 million put on the federal budget and state budgets to say that mentoring programs should happen. And they're able to, in some sense, do that advocacy from the grassroots. A lot of times when we're nonprofits, we have no way, we don't know how to reach government. We've been very fortunate with the government of Karnataka here and the government of Telangana because they necessarily have the outreach that accepts these ideas from nonprofits. But how would you advise, knowing how these commissions work on your side, Rishi, and probably how these policies get made? And for you, Dr. Gowda, you've been on the other side of the table as a policy maker, right? What's the best way for nonprofits or others doing this to reach you all to say, can you all take these ideas forward when you all are making these policy plans and documents?
No. You're the panelist.
Okay,
I'm just a
thank
moderator.
you. Yeah, so never easy, and probably Dr. Gowda would agree that it takes a lot of continuous effort to convince policymakers, right? That limited resources. Always, it's a challenge of limited resources, right? I mean, policy making is about distribution of these resources. So, whether to put it into mentoring or, for instance, hiring, let's say, professional mentors, right? Or would it be much better to make the teaching faculty larger, which is, again, something that we keep demanding. So one way is through summits like this. I think, these are initial steps wherein people would start hearing about the importance and the criticality of something like this. We all have acknowledged that it's one mentor or the other that has got us to where we are. And so now we know that there are a large number of people, again, because of the network gap and because of the disadvantages that they come with, that they just don't get that opportunity. So, and with policy making being particularly, as Dr. Gowda was mentioning, about reaching that, last child, last student, it is critical that policymakers look at aspects. And mentoring is something that I think is just about coming up Even though, as Dr. Mark in the morning was talking of 80 years of research, very little have we heard of that. And I think summits like this is what's going to push that agenda. In fact, to give you one example, early childhood care and education, right? Though we've had ICDS since 1975 talking about it, and we've had Anganwadis, but it never came into the mainstream. It took a lot of effort of civil society organizations to continuously talk about it, and now there's traction. And in fact, now you have departments across various governments reaching out to people who are into ECC, right? So it's, I think, taken about 20-25 years of effort to get ECCE into the state that it is at, which now everyone reaches out to you, and it's not the other way around wherein organizations are reaching out to the department.
One second, I just have
Sure,
to answer Arundhati. See, as a policymaker, right, politicians are constantly looking for good ideas that can make a difference, all right? And those sorts of initiatives that are mentoring as such is seen as a lower cost initiative. It doesn't really require some mega budget as of now, right? And so these sorts of ideas are something, if you just look at how we developed the manifesto in the Congress Party, well, 2019 election manifesto, I was a convener, we had a lot of consultations. We talked to a lot of people, took inputs, and put them in our manifesto. If we had won, we would have implemented that. This time, the manifesto talked about internships, right? We called it apprenticeships, but the government has actually announced a massive internship program, taken that idea, regardless of the ownership, and basically implemented it. So I think that if you can be an advocate, write more about it, talk about how these things are making a huge difference in people's lives, I think governments, policymakers across the board are eager for new solutions that can make a difference.
Good afternoon. I'm Shrikant from Task, Telangana. My question is to you, Dr. Rishi and Dr. Gora. The point is, we spoke about the National Mentoring Mission. When we have a model like AIM, Atal Innovation Mission, and the mentors over there, and thousands of mentors signed up over there, then why can't we have more mentors coming in? And how do we make that happen?
Thanks, sir. I think that's another thing that we should watch out for. That unnecessary reinvention of wheels should completely be avoided. I mean, there are so many platforms now, and it's about strengthening them, reinvigorating them, right? And speaking to the key audience, in some sense, people like you who are within the departments of education, I think it is very important for us to use these policy provisions to make the space to use what is already available. See, what policy provides us is with that tool to say that there is this framework, I have these resources, now I'm going to just use that to make use of the resources that I already have. And there are multiple things that would become feasible when we start using the policy provisions in that manner. Because otherwise, we are continuously waiting for guidelines and other kinds of decision making. In fact, we were talking about how teachers are overloaded, right? We know that that's the case, but we also know that as, let's say, institutional leaders, there is much more that we can do with regard to the timetabling, the flexibility that we could bring about as institution leaders, so that our teachers get more space for doing something which is even more critical. Right? So in many cases, I would think that rather than an extra class on a particular subject, keeping aside that time for something like mentoring, wherein you are engaging with your students one-on-one, is much better use of that time, knowing from where most of our students are coming from.
So I'd say there's an element of marketing and packaging here. Atal Innovation Mission sounds like something very cutting edge and worthwhile participating in. So I think we need to do similar initiatives across the board in other kinds of mentoring, but that's showing you that something is possible. Now, we've actually run out of time, but how many hands did we have left? 1, 2, 3, 4. Can we just have a very quick round of all of you just raise your point in one sentence, and then we'll have closing remarks and close this whole thing. Is that okay? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
talking about the NEP and you told about the, 4 points. And when Nivedita was also talking about the practice, the pilot kind of things that we've done, we see that, in policies, things are mentioned quite clearly. However, when it comes to actually implementing it, there's a lot of gap. So, how do we bring these two things together? How do we bridge that gap?
That was my
Bridging the gap between in the schools already there is a policy by the government that there should be a counselor, but it's not in practice. And most of the time they, just because it is a policy, it's a rule, there is a room set aside, but it is used as a storeroom. So if that is the situation, how this policy can become an implemented.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lalit from Udyan Care, and we all believe that mentoring is a good tool to shape a life of an individual. And in such situation, we are also facing such challenges finding good mentors. So in India, what I learned that we generally what we follow the assignment of mentors, it is a gender based. Generally, what we do, we assign mentors to the same gender, male to male and female to female. So my question for Dr. Nivedita, so do you feel it will just find as an obstacle or maybe a hurdle to spread out this mentoring mission?
Which we are going to have? We are going to have NEP or we are going to have ACP now? Straight question.
Okay. All right. We've covered the questions. Anyone who wants to respond, please.
You had a direct question, just.
Okay, so yeah, all right. So I'll actually ask the practice question. So this is something that was taught to me by my mentor, that a good policy actually has 5 elements, which has to be consistent, which is philosophy, principle, process, people, and practice. If all of those things are not, and then of course, because I'm from the organization that I'm, public finance. So if all of those things are not in sync, then we will have implementation problems. The problem is not that the policy is great and the implementation is bad. The policy is not great because the implementation then, so the thing is, if you don't take into consideration the process by which it gets implemented, the people who are going to implement it, and the practice by which you have not laid it out, saying how will this work, not just, and Rishikesh was talking about money. It is important to also engage with where, not just in terms of resources, in terms of money, but also in terms of time, right? So readjustment is really what I think a lot of what we do in terms of how is this consistently being followed from the philosophy of what policy happens all the way to practice, and each of these gets translated into a policy document, and it can be done. So a lot of the time that you see practice work is when each of these are internally consistent and has actually been thought about. And the second question to you about the gender is, I think it depends on the subject, because there are some spaces where you don't necessarily have to have different, and the thing is, it's not just about gender. It can be about caste. It can be about, there is an entire gamut of intersectionality that we do need to take into consideration. And at any given point in time, the mentor and mentee are an outsider and an insider. There is no way that you're going to be inside that. So I understand that there is a specific way in which specific comfort levels can happen when you have the same gender, but distance, social distance is a real thing. That does not necessarily mean that, I'm comfortable talking about some things with anyone, right? So it really goes back to something that I will go on talking about, is the relationship. Because you can build relationships across difference that need not be gender.
Okay, so let me take that direct question, sir, you asked. That was a bouncer, right? So like a good test batsman, I can just duck. But today's T20, you want me to touch it, right? Put it over the keeper's head or something. But then on a serious note, see, at the end of the day, in terms of policies broadly, as long as they are within the constitutional framework, it is all good to do things. So I'm sure things in NEP will anyways be, it's already being done. Similarly, for instance, Prerna, right? SCP would come in probably with even better ideas, contextualizing things that we would require in our states. So I don't think we as educators and people interested in, in this particular context, mentoring, really need to be bothered about NEP, SCP, or whatever, is my sense. For instance, I'll just quickly give an example of what we do at Azim Premji University. For us, majority of our students comes from very, very difficult backgrounds they come from. In fact, our university is very young compared to average university age, right? We're just about 12 years. What we've realized is that to begin with, there are many students, particularly from regions from where we want them to come, are finding it difficult to even take our very simple entrance exams. In fact, if you look at our entrance exam, you would think that anybody should be able to get in. And so we've now started working with the Azim Premji Foundation colleagues in the districts that we work in to start having bridge programs, to just give them exposure to even the kind of simple entrance exams that are there. Once they come in, we have a summer program. And then we have a continuous mentoring. Each of us faculty members, every year we get 5 mentees whom we have to be with all through for the 2 years, and they can come to us for any kind of question, academic, non-academic, personal, everything, right? So you need to, and we put in all this, even, whether there was NEP, no policy, right? We had these things. So I think as educators, we will have to think as to what is it that we require, and there would be some policy or other which would back our good intentions.
On that note, thank you, Aditi, Rishikesh, Nivedita. Well, give it up for this wonderful panel that we had. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for your incredible time, insights, and expertise with us today. So, as a token of our gratitude, we would like to hand over a memento. So, I request my colleague Annie to hand over to all of you. So, Dr. Rajiv Gowda. Yeah. Aditi Jha. Yeah, Dr. Nivedita Menon. And Rishikesh BS. Thank you so much, all of you.